Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. Co-hosted by the inquisitive public speaking champion, Mike McVeigh, and energy, economics, and technology expert, Matt Jensen. Join us as we explore all things energy, economic, tech, and political, and how they will affect our future. So the creator of WeWork has received a $350 million investment from venture capitalist firm A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz. And we talked previously in one of our earlier episodes a little bit about the Hulu documentary We Crash and a little bit of what the hype was surrounding WeWork. So maybe give us a quick recap and why this is an intriguing or important deal.
Well, it's kind of interesting because it's another venture capital firm investing in basically real estate properties. So one of the interesting parts about WeWork is, well, they're now a publicly traded company. They went public through a SPAC, so a special purpose acquisition company, and they're valued, I think, between $3 and $4 billion. But at one time, they were valued at $44 billion because people are valuing them as a technology company, which is very interesting. So it's, these venture firms typically aren't investing in asset heavy businesses. So I think that's a really interesting angle that it's, here we are again, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
That's crazy. Excuse me. That's crazy. So does it make sense for a venture capitalist to invest in a real estate portfolio?
Not typically. I think this was one of the big questions last time that we had. So my friends and I that talk stocks all the time were like, this makes no sense why a real estate firm is being valued as a technology firm. And if, we kind of remember from the documentary and other stuff going on behind the scenes, was that Adam Newmann had sold, mainly SoftBank, but also others. SoftBank's like essentially the largest venture capital firm that there is. I'm not sure if they're necessarily considered a venture capital firm, but led by the legendary investor Masa Son, and they're out of Japan. But they invested billions of dollars in WeWork, and Adam Newmann had successfully convinced him and sold other people, like, a lot of celebrities on this. For instance, I think Ashton Kutcher, I watched a video of him and Adam Newmann together, and Ashton Kutcher was basically explaining the audience where they were. Maybe it was at TechCrunch Disrupt or something like that, that why it was a technology company and not investment company. So they had a couple, I would say, technology things. They had a proprietary, like, Facebook style community that I don't think really was used as much as they said it was. And they also had a proprietary planning software that they said basically allowed them the ability to get a lot more revenue out of a square foot. And quickly plan a lot of these facilities. So it's, I don't think that was really viable. And if that is an internal proprietary planning software, you're still basically able to make a larger return, but not that much larger off of buying fixed asset real estate.
Right.
So being valued at $44 billion and now back to earth, it's basically valued in line with essentially the multiples off of square footage as other rental or office sharing platforms that you have,
Right.
or the traditional real estate investment trusts.
I mean, one of the things I do kind of like about the idea of what WeWork was and whatever it kind of is now is, there's this idea after having lived in a dorm, and a lot of my religious feedback and stuff was people living communally in a community. And I really do like a lot of that. I think one of the things that maybe separates this from some of the communal communities that my wife and I had considered at a time is that this isn't so much like everybody still makes their own decisions. Like, whereas like in a communal, they share pretty much everything and give out to what's needed to the people. So like if you and I were together and you needed a microphone or something, then you would get a microphone. I might not get one, even though I might want one, but it would serve the community best if you got one. So you kind of have that more of a dorm room kind of feel to it. I know you made some notes about frat and sorority, but I was never in those, so I don't have a way of relating to those.
Yeah. It's so they had multiple, or WeWork had multiple. I think they just have WeWork now, which is the office sharing, and it does have I would say a communal aspect to it. They're like, they seem like they brought out that kind of like startup culture that we remember from the early 2000s, where they had, kegs and alcohol and stuff around, and really nice facilities.
Right.
So they're very nice facilities. So like I think that they're super quality, and it's a great company. I think a lot of the issue was that it was valued as a technology company, so a crazy multiple versus, maybe at a higher level than what it was before.
Right.
So credit for Adam building a good company. Like, it's very hard to do that, but they also had We Live, which was like you said, kind of a communal living sort of setup. And that was a great idea. Essentially that's the premise behind the company that he has now, because it's not office space anymore. It's this residential living sense. So I think that, this investment does make sense in terms of investment. Maybe like, I don't know the specifics of the deal, but I think it's more in line with not being a technology company as before.
Right.
But it does make sense from the communal living aspect, that, there's a lot of appeal to that, especially for younger millennials, that they don't need like this large space. Like New York, for instance, it's a pretty common thing for maybe like illegal lofts and stuff like that, where you have basically a bunch of people living in a very small apartment together because it's so expensive. I kind of feel like this plays off of that sense with the communal living space. But it's nice. So if you're appealing to that, 20-year-old or maybe even early 30s, if you're still single that likes to party and likes living in basically that dorm fraternity sorority type community,
right?
Like I think this really fits a market niche that's not really relevant right now.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's not a super upcharge, where you can still keep a lot of what you'd be spending on housing, unnecessary housing. If you're able to keep that definitely translate. If you're spending as much as you would on one of those New York apartments, sharing it with 3 friends, and still paying too much, then it doesn't really work as well.
Well,
but,
if you pay for dorms at a university, it's usually way higher than you would pay if you're off campus. So I think, if you look at some of the facilities that they have at University of Oklahoma, near to where we live,
right,
they look like luxury apartments. So
true. That's definitely what's been moving toward and stuff. Keep on forgetting that it was 15 years ago when I graduated. So, and those dorms were not nearly, those were the dorms you see in movies and stuff, not like the old movies.
The talkies.
The talkies. Yeah, back in my day. Yeah, so I'm not necessarily this actually sounds like maybe there's a lot less hype attached to it than some of the stuff that the WeWork 1.0 or whatever had, because it seemed like when I finally heard of WeWork the first time, I think we talked about this in our last recording about this, that it was already kind of on its way down when I first found out about it. And then like a week after I found out about it, that Hulu series came out, and I'm like, or a documentary came out, and I'm like, what the crap? Did I really just miss out on everything?
Yeah.
Makes me kind of really wonder what world I was in for that period of time. Though I could say the same about Theranos. So I guess that whole time period, like from 2002 to about 2011, I just wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the world.
Well, I think this was after that. So,
well, that makes me feel even worse. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, well, like you made the comparison to Theranos, right? Like I think that there's a difference between this and that. So I would say that this was kind of more irrational exuberance. Like people had, especially, Masa-san, the investor, had who's a legendary investor in VC and isn't a fool by any means.
Right.
Had an irrationally exuberant view of what this could be in terms of like the financial elements of it. But Theranos was straight up a fraud. So
right.
Like things are essentially valued from what people value them for. And that's entirely legal. Like I could sell you this chapstick for $500 because I said it was special, and you might buy it. But if I'm saying that it was used by Queen Elizabeth and it wasn't, that's kind of fraud. So I think it's kind of, it was a bad investment, too much money. I think the too much money really forced it to go from a good, solid investment into something crazy. And you always have to question too why VCs are investing this much money in stuff that's not venture related, I would say. So maybe the things that both SoftBank and Andreessen Horowitz have in common is that they're extremely large, like they've got tons of money under management, and it's really hard to allocate money towards, like you need the deal flow for it. So there's just really the venture capability, or the kind of the venture market isn't necessarily able to stomach like all this money, for traditional venture capital investments. And I think with SoftBank in particular, up until, recently, they had allocated so much money to so many companies at such high valuations that it really pushed deal terms into crazy levels where a lot of people just couldn't rationally invest at those prices. It was too much money. There's just not enough opportunity out there in terms of companies to really invest in. So it was, I think things have come down to earth. Like SoftBank started that Vision Fund in recent years, where they raised $100 billion. I think majority of that came from the Saudi sovereign wealth fund, and it's really hard to find good early stage investments. And
Right.
Masa Son has historically been one of the best in history at finding ways to put capital that really turns an idea into something that's long lasting and creates a lot of value for people. But I think that there's, when you get to that sort of scale, it's really hard to manage money and get it allocated where it needs to be fit, especially if you're not investing basically in public companies and stuff.
Right. Cool.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting because, that documentary that we talked about last time, it was very cultish behavior. So they had mandatory retreats and stuff like that too. And, essentially they were renting out office space. So if you're talking about communal living where people live there all the time, the community living aspect has been around for forever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just how they kind of package it together, I guess.
Yeah. So maybe it's going to be a legit cult, very profitable one.
And one that maybe will be less culty in its cultishness. So Teal Swan, take lessons, or is that too soon?
Well, so Adam Newmann grew up in a kibbutz, which is a Jewish communal living format when he was young.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting that he's basically like found a way to take his upbringing and allocate it. Yeah, monetize it. So, but it's interesting. I think a lot of people. So I don't remember who it was, but it was some investor said that if he ever came out with a startup, he would invest in it immediately because Adam Newmann's the greatest salesman that he's ever seen before. It's just, so this investment is called Flow. And he also has Flow Carbon, which recently came out, which is a blockchain backed, let's see, what do they call that? Like climate credits sort of thing. And then this is a totally different company. And I think he's got Flow something else, which is another company. So when I read about it, the Flow is related to Taoist principles. And it's interesting that he's kind of blending this whole spirituality sort of thing with business. We'll see how on the up and up it is, but when basically SoftBank and WeWork negotiated his exit package, I think he left with like $1.1 billion. So he walked away with a couple $2 billion. And before getting this investment in this, I think he had built a real estate portfolio to build this out in the couple $100 million range. So after he left, he's really gone back to kind of this, I'd say, multifamily style of real estate and been developing some of these undervalued stuff. So, like I think it's really kind of like a gentrification play. Maybe buying older buildings in less desirable areas and making it desirable because you have Flow living there now, kind of the new version of We Live, essentially. So it's interesting. We'll see where it goes. There'll be another exciting ride to watch, and probably have another documentary one of these days.
Yeah, hopefully it talks about it's not going to be like XFL 2.0 where it failed just a little bit less miserably than the first one.
Yeah.
I knew what those happened, so I guess I just wasn't in the know with WeWork. What makes me sad.
Yeah. What do you think about kind of communal living being the way of future in some respect?
I was a lot more attracted to the idea when I was younger. That's definitely the case. I think it could definitely work. I look at when we lived in Western Pennsylvania, one of the things that was kind of cool is that there were hardly any yards at all. And the yards that there were usually the size of a small room, like maybe a big closet for over this area of the world. And they're like, oh man, we just want bigger yards. We want bigger yards. And then I'm coming from Oklahoma, Texas, where everybody's yard is like huge and stuff. It was just kind of a weird difference. And the houses that were there, because it was a former mining community, they were so close together. So you could basically walk in between them, like maybe a little bit longer than my shoulder width, but not much more than that.
Yeah.
And that was the size difference. So even the understanding of technology and stuff or not technology, but like the understanding of TV history of saying like our neighbors are too loud or something. There's a big difference in Oklahoma where I'm 20 feet away from my neighbor in my my westernmost room against the wall. I'm 20 feet away from their wall on their eastmost side, as opposed to somebody literally being 2 feet away. Mm-hmm. That being said, though, I mean, and actually one of the books that you and I are working through, Generations, it's not an uncommon thing for families to cycle through times where multiple generations of a family, like 3 or 4 generations, might live in the same property together. So I think there's some definitely positive aspects of communal living. I would be kind of curious once you start mixing in people that are not part of your tribe, whatever that might mean, how that would work. And maybe that's what it would happen is that there'd be a different tribe for each building or floor. So instead of just moving into an apartment building or townhouses or something of that nature, where you're just with a bunch of strangers who are all looking for just either to the location or the expense, that like I would know that everybody on my general area were people who had similar values as me or something. That would be it'd be interesting. It'd also be interesting to see how soon it would take to blow everything up and everybody would be like pissed at each other, how quickly they come back together after something. I mean, we talked about Elizabeth Holmes, like if everybody was there for an Elizabeth Holmes like kind of thing, and then after the fact of finding out that she did all these horrible things that they just didn't know about, do you get like a new building that you get to go to if you're now in the anti-Elizabeth Holmes camp as opposed to the ones who are in it? So I don't know. It'd be interesting. It's definitely If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewnextpodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.